On a continent where political rivalries often redefine national destinies, the conflict between Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, Nigeria's first president, and General Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, the leader of the secessionist Biafra, stands as a titan clash in the annals of African history. This video endeavors to dissect the intricate personal and political relationship between these two influential figures, whose actions and interactions have had lasting impacts on Nigeria, particularly in the eastern region. The relationship between Zik and the Ojukwu family began not with Chukwuemeka, but with his father, Sir Louis Ojukwu, during the pre-independence era in 1937. This initial connection was financial, rooted in Zik's need for funding his national newspaper project, the West African Pilot. Sir Louis not only invested £500 of his own money in 1937, but he also got his rich friends to invest additional £1,500 in the newspaper. Unfortunately, following economic decline that affected some corporate businesses in Lagos at the time, Sir Louis panicked within weeks and demanded his money back despite Zik's pleadings. Sir Louis will get his full refund, but luckily for Zik, a mining magnate in Minna, Sir Greenham Badiwe offered him the whole money he needed, and Zik was able to launch his newspaper on the 22nd of November 1937. But that was not the end of the relationship between Zik and Ojukwu Sr. Sir Louis Ojukwu, Nigeria's first billionaire, was a very wealthy man, and Zik's political party, the NCNC, needed a lot of funding. Sir Louis was happy to help, and their friendship reignited again. This part of their history is crucial as it laid the foundational dynamics of trust, mutual benefit, and eventual political collaboration, which would later evolve into fierce rivalry. The year 1966 marked a pivotal turn in the relationship between Zik and the Ojukwu family. Following the military coup, political parties were banned, and Zik was ousted from the presidency. In a dramatic twist, Ojukwu's son, Chukwuemeka, was appointed as the military governor of the eastern region. General Ojukwu's actions following his appointment were radical. He arrested key political figures who were Zik's allies, and also demanded that Zik refund a bank loan from the African Continental Bank, ACB. ACB was founded by Zik in 1949 as the first Nigeria's indigenous bank, but was subsequently nationalized by the Eastern Regional Government. Ojukwu was adamant that Zik should pay up the debt of £162,000 immediately. Although Ojukwu's reforms were popular among Easterners who had no sympathy for the so-called sit-tight ministers of Eastern Regional Government, this particular demand angered Zik, and he fired 2 angry letters to Sir Louis on 18th of May 1966, demanding intervention from Ojukwu Sr. Zik complained that other military governors in the West and the North had not been tough against senior politicians there. It is fair to say from this point on that Zik and his allies, which included the cream of Eastern politicians, considered the Ojukwus as their political foes. It is also fair to say that nothing would have made Zik accept a political situation where an Ojukwu is head of the whole country. However, the tragic events of May, July, and September 1966, in which thousands of Igbo civilians lost their lives across Nigeria in the most barbaric way, will force Zik to accept the inevitable. It needs to be emphasized that these atrocities happened 1 year before the Biafran Republic was declared. Eastern politicians from all tribes and parties, including Zik, rallied around General Ojukwu and urged him to declare a republic because they believed it was the only way the East could defend itself from the horrors unleashed by the Nigerian state. While both Zik and Ojukwu agreed on the necessity of Biafra at its inception, their visions diverged significantly. Zik was never really thoroughly sold on the idea of a Biafran republic. He was the father of Nigerian independence, and perhaps regarded Biafra as a short-term measure to enable Nigerians go back to the negotiation table to figure out what type of country they wanted. It needs to be said that Ojukwu also shared the same mindset and demonstrated it by active participation in the Abori talks. For both men, Biafra was negotiable. By this time, Sir Louis Odumegwu Ojukwu, Nigeria's first billionaire that donated the Nigerian Stock Exchange building to the nation, had died in September 1966. In the 1967 talks at Abuja, Ghana, which was the last opportunity to avoid the tragic Nigerian civil war, Ojukwu parleyed with Nigerian ruler Gen Yakubu Gowon, and agreement was struck. Unfortunately, Gowon's position was weak. In a Nigerian government dominated by northern officers, Gowon was from a minority Christian tribe. The real power belonged to a jihadist, who would later be accused of the infamous Asaba massacre, Murtala Muhammad, and he was baying for more revenge. Gowon repudiated the agreement he signed, and the Nigerian Civil War began in May 1967. But Zik will not give up on a negotiated settlement to the Nigerian crisis. He continued to counsel Ojukwu to accept mediation talks. But the Nigerian side, dominated by the pro-war side in Gowon's government, was intransigent and wanted war at all cost. Onward, Gowon will no longer accept an unconditional peace talk. Zik counseled Ojukwu to request intervention from the Organization for African Unity, OAU. Ojukwu sent Zik instead to speak to other heads of state in Africa, given that Zik was also a former head of state himself. Zik visited Liberia's President Taubman, who contacted the Ethiopian Emperor, Haile Selassie. The latter agreed to add Biafra to the OAU conference agenda in 1969, held in Congo. The Nigerian delegation led by Obafemi Awolowo opposed the Biafran topic being raised at the conference, arguing that it was a Nigerian internal affairs. Awolowo got his wish, and OAU was precluded from mediating in the civil war. Ojukwu was disappointed after Zik arrived from Congo and will henceforth leave the matter of any further peace talk to Zik. Later, at the request of Ojukwu, Zik will go on a diplomatic tour to convince African heads of state to recognize Biafra as an independent country. Zik was partially successful. Zik's friend, President Leopold Senghor of Senegal, though sympathetic, said he couldn't because the majority of his supporters are Muslims and considered the war a religious one. But the leaders of Ivory Coast, Zambia and Gabon agreed to recognize Biafra, hoping it will force Nigeria to the negotiating table. These recognitions worked like charm, as Nigeria immediately dropped her preconditions and offered to resume talks with Biafra by March 31, 1968. Ojukwu and Zik attended the Niamey peace talk together, but Gowon did not show up, but sent a junior minister, Femi Okunu, which was a deliberate insult to the leaders of Ethiopia, Liberia, Ghana, and Niger Republic who were present. Ojukwu was livid at this point and concluded that the matter will be decided on battlefronts. Zik was a much older man, while Ojukwu was in his early 30s and was much more cautious. He encouraged Ojukwu to continue lobbying OAU for intervention, given the growing sympathy for Biafra, but Ojukwu had other ideas at this point. Though Ojukwu will agree to attend the OAU meeting at Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, he will shock Zik with a sharp attack on almost all the world powers, UK, US, Russia, and OAU, in a fiery speech. Zik, a very consummate politician who knew this was political naivety, because Biafra needed these world powers more than they needed Biafra. Zik understood that international politics was a game, but Ojukwu naively saw diplomacy as a moral persuasion. Zik went into a discussion with Ojukwu at Addis Ababa and tried to explain to him that the world may still pay attention if he was willing to discuss the issue of oil, but this can change. Ojukwu was, however, confident that Port Harcourt was impregnable. Understanding the dynamics, Nigerian forces moved fast, and 2 weeks after Addis Ababa, Port Harcourt fell to federal forces, neutralizing Biafra's strongest bargaining tools in international politics. At the fall of Port Harcourt, Ojukwu asked if he could go to the United Nations to seek support for Biafra. Unbeknownst to Ojukwu, Zik was no longer interested in acting as Ojukwu's peace envoy, as he believed that the opportunity had been lost. But he will use the opportunity to go on a voluntary exile in London. Perhaps it was his defection to the Nigerian side in August 1968 that made Zik a controversial figure amongst Eastern Nigerians. Many considered it as a grave betrayal, as his global status was important to the Biafran cause. Ironically, the Nigerian press, dominated by journalists from Western region, blamed Zik for the entire civil war, although this was because Zik was contesting against Awolowo in the 1979 election, and it was politically convenient to paint Zik as a Biafran separatist. In summary, the relationship between Zik and Ojukwu, which had a significant impact on Biafra, like everything in life, was a lot more complicated. Zik always saw the big picture ahead of his contemporaries. Zik believed that Biafra would not succeed without foreign friends, and moved on once the likelihood of that evaporated. Please consider liking and sharing this video if you enjoyed it. It will be appreciated. You can also subscribe to be notified of new videos.